What the Dog Knew. A TLW story. There's a particular kind of smoke that comes from a house fire in the middle of winter. It doesn't rise straight up like summer smoke does. Instead, it rolls low across the ground, mixing with the cold air, turning the world gray and uncertain. That's what I remember most about that February night. Not the flames, not the sirens, but the way the smoke moved across the frozen street like something living, something searching. I've been a firefighter for 23 years, long enough to know that no two fires are the same, but long enough too that they start to blur together in your memory. Structure fires, car fires, brush fires, false alarms at 3 in the morning that turn your stomach sour with adrenaline and relief. You think you've seen everything. You think you understand the shape of emergency, the arc of crisis and resolution, but there are nights that teach you otherwise, nights that show you how little you actually know about courage, about instinct, about the things that move through this world with a purpose we can barely comprehend. This is the story of one of those nights. The call came in at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. I remember because I just poured my third cup of coffee. And I remember thinking that if we got through to midnight without a call, maybe we'd have a quiet shift for once. The station had that particular stillness that settles in late on a weeknight, just the low murmur of the television in the common room, the occasional creak of someone shifting weight in a chair, the ambient hum of the building itself breathing around us. Then the tones dropped. That sound, no matter how many years you do this job, no matter how many times you hear it, it does something to your nervous system. An immediate spike of alertness, a flooding of chemicals into your bloodstream that makes the world suddenly sharp and clear. The dispatcher's voice came through calm and measured, the way they're trained. Residential structure fire, possible occupants inside, multiple calls from neighbors reporting flames visible from the street. We were moving before she finished talking. 30 seconds from tone to truck. That's the drill. That's the training. You don't think about it. Your hands know where your gear is. Your feet know the path to the engine. Your mind is already shifting into that particular state of focused calm that keeps you alive in burning buildings. It was cold that night. The kind of February cold that settles into your bones and makes everything brittle. The streets were empty. The houses dark except for the occasional porch light or the blue glow of a television through a window. We rolled through residential neighborhoods with our lights painting the night red and white, and I watched the familiar street slip past, the corner store where I buy my morning coffee, the elementary school where my daughter went to kindergarten 15 years ago, the old oak tree that's been standing on Maple Avenue for longer than anyone can remember. You'd think after 2 decades of this work, the adrenaline would fade. You'd think the edge would dull, but it doesn't. Every call, you're aware of what might be waiting. Every call, you're running towards something that most people are running away from. And every call, there's a small voice in the back of your mind, asking if this is the one that doesn't go the way you planned. We smelled the fire before we saw it. That's how it works. Smoke travels faster than light, and it has a smell that's unmistakable once you've learned it. Burning wood, yes, but also burning plastic, burning fabric, burning insulation, burning memories. Everything that makes a house a home, reduced to chemistry and ash. The house was a single-story ranch on Willow Street, set back from the road with a chain-link fence running along the front property line. Nothing remarkable about it. Vinyl siding, small front porch, a detached garage that had seen better days. The kind of house you'd drive past 1,000 times without really noticing. But tonight it was fully involved, flames visible through the front windows, smoke pouring from the eaves, the roof already starting to sag in the middle. And standing in the front yard, still in her bathrobe and slippers, was an elderly woman screaming about her dog. I know what you're thinking. I know because I thought it too, for just a split second when I first heard her. Priorities. Human life always comes first. That's the rule. That's the training. That's what keeps us from making decisions that could cost lives. But as I got closer, as I heard the raw terror in her voice, I understood that this wasn't about priorities. It was about something deeper than that. Something about what we choose to love in this world, and what we're willing to risk for it. Her name was Margaret. I learned that later. She was 74 years old, lived alone except for the dog, a mixed-breed shepherd she'd had for 6 years. She'd woken up to the smoke alarm, tried to get to the dog's bed in the back bedroom, but the smoke was too thick, the heat too intense. She made it out barely, crawling on her hands and knees to the front door. But the dog was still inside. "He's in there," she kept saying, grabbing at my coat with hands that were shaking so badly she could barely grip the fabric. "He's in there. He won't come out. He's scared of the smoke. He's in the back bedroom. Please, you have to." Captain Morrison was already setting up command, establishing water supply, coordinating with the second engine that was rolling in behind us. Standard procedure, by the book operation. I could see him doing the math in his head. Structural integrity, collapse potential, the risk versus the potential gain. A dog versus the safety of his crew. He looked at me. We've worked together for 12 years. We don't need to say much to understand each other. Quick in and out, he said. You see flames rolling, you abort. No heroics. I nodded, pulled my mask into place, checked my air supply. 3,000 psi. Enough for about 20 minutes of working time, less if you're exerting yourself, which you always are in a fire. Jake Turner was my partner that night. Young guy, only in his 3rd year, but solid. Good instincts. The kind of firefighter who stays calm when things go wrong, which is the only kind you want beside you when you're walking into a burning building. He gave me the thumbs up, checked his own gear, and we moved toward the front door. The first thing that hits you when you enter a structure fire is the heat. Not the kind of heat you feel standing in front of a fireplace or opening an oven door. This is heat that has mass and weight and presence. It pushes against you like a physical force, and even through all your protective gear, you can feel it trying to find a way in, looking for exposed skin, searching for vulnerabilities. The second thing is the darkness. Smoke isn't just gray haze like you see in the movies. It's black and thick and absolute. Your flashlight beam penetrates maybe 18 inches before it just stops. You're navigating by feel, by training, by the mental map you built in those first few seconds of size up when you looked at the structure from the outside. We stayed low. Heat rises so the cooler air, relatively speaking, stays near the floor. We moved in a crouch, one hand on the wall for orientation, calling out to each other every few seconds to maintain contact. The house was small enough that I had a sense of the layout. Living room, kitchen to the right, bedrooms probably down a hallway to the left. The dog, Margaret had said, was in the back bedroom. The smoke was thickest down that hallway. We could hear the fire now. Really hear it. Not just the distant crackling, but the deep bass roar of combustion-consuming structure. The sharp crack of wood splitting under stress. The occasional boom of something exploding in the heat. A house fire has a voice. It speaks in the language of destruction, and if you listen carefully enough, it tells you how much time you have left. Not much, that voice was saying. Not much at all. The first bedroom door was already open, the interior fully involved. We passed it, moved deeper. The heat was building, the smoke getting denser. I could feel my air supply hissing through the regulator, each breath mechanical and measured. You learn to control your breathing in this work. Panic burns through your air faster than anything, and panic in a burning building is how people die. The second bedroom door was closed. In a fire, a closed door can save your life. It's a barrier against heat and smoke, a temporary refuge that can buy precious minutes, but it's also a barrier against rescue. I reached for the handle, hot even through my glove, and pushed the door open. The bedroom was relatively clear of smoke compared to the hallway. That closed door had done its job, but I could see the glow of flames through the walls now, the fire eating through from the adjacent room, and I knew we had maybe 2 minutes before this space became untenable. The dog was in the corner, pressed against the wall beside the bed, his eyes reflecting our flashlight beams in that eerie way that dogs' eyes do. He was shaking, but he wasn't making a sound. No barking, no whining, just absolute frozen terror. I got him, I said to Jake, moving toward the animal. But when I reached out, the dog didn't move toward me. He pulled back, pressing harder against the wall, his whole body rigid with fear. I've worked enough animal rescues to know that scared animals don't think rationally. They can't process that you're trying to help them. All they know is that their world is burning, and a stranger in a mask and heavy gear is reaching for them. I was going to have to grab him whether he wanted it or not. But then something strange happened. The dog suddenly bolted, not toward the door, not toward me, but toward the closet. He pawed at the closet door, once, twice, then looked back at me with an expression that was so clearly, so undeniably purposeful that it stopped me cold. "We gotta move," Jake was saying from the doorway. "This room's about to go." The dog pawed at the closet door again, whined once, sharp and insistent. I've been a firefighter for 23 years. I've learned to trust my instincts, to read situations, to understand when something is off or unusual or important. And every instinct I had was screaming that this wasn't just a terrified animal acting randomly. I moved to the closet, pulled open the door, and there, curled up in the back corner behind a pile of blankets and coats, barely visible in the smoke and darkness, was a child. Time does strange things in moments like this. It can stretch and compress, make seconds feel like minutes, and minutes feel like seconds. I remember reaching into that closet, remember my hands closing around a small body, a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, unconscious but breathing. I remember the weight of her in my arms, lighter than I expected, fragile in a way that made my chest tighten. I remember Jake's voice suddenly sharp with urgency. "We need to go now!" The fire had breached the wall. I could see flames now, not just glow but actual fire, curling through the drywall like something alive and hungry. The heat had gone from intense to unbearable. Another 30 seconds and we wouldn't be able to get out. I had the girl, but the dog was still there, still pressed against that wall, still watching me with those reflected eyes. "Come on," I said, and my voice sounded strange even to me, muffled by the mask but somehow pleading. "Come on, boy, let's go." He didn't move. Jake grabbed my shoulder. "Dave, we're out of time. I know the rules. I know that you don't risk your life for animals. I know that every second we stayed increased the chance that none of us, not me, not Jake, not the little girl in my arms, would make it out of that room. I know all of this intellectually, professionally, by training and experience. But I also know that this dog had just saved a child's life, and I wasn't leaving him. I shifted the girl to one arm, God, she was so light, and lunged for the dog. He let me grab him this time, let me scoop him up with my free arm, and then we were moving, all of us together, back into that smoke-filled hallway. The trip back was a blur of heat and darkness and mechanical breathing. The floor was getting hot under my boots, which meant the fire was below us now too, eating through the floor joists. The house was going to collapse, not in an hour, not in 10 minutes. Soon, very soon. Jake led the way, one hand on my shoulder so we stayed together. The girl was limp in my arms. The dog was struggling now, frightened by the motion and the heat and the noise. But I held him tight against my chest and just kept moving forward, following Jake's shadow through the smoke. We hit the front door and burst out into the cold February night like we were being born into it. The air outside felt impossibly clean and sharp after the smoke, painful in my lungs even through the mask. I pulled the mask off, gulped in that cold air, and laid the girl down on the frozen grass while the paramedics rushed over. The dog collapsed beside her, coughing and shaking but alive. And then Margaret was there, dropping to her knees on the frozen ground, reaching for both of them at once, her dog and a granddaughter I hadn't known existed. "Emma," she was saying over and over. "Emma, baby, oh God, Emma." The girl, Emma, had been staying with her grandmother for the week while her parents dealt with some family emergency. Margaret thought she'd gotten her out first, before going back for the dog. But the confusion of the smoke, the panic, the fear, somewhere in that chaos, Emma had wandered away from where Margaret had left her, had ended up in the back bedroom, had hidden in the closet the way scared children do. If we'd just grabbed the dog and left, if I hadn't seen what he was trying to tell us, if I hadn't opened that closet door, the paramedics got Emma breathing better, got oxygen on her, loaded her into the ambulance. She was going to be okay. Smoke inhalation, some minor burns on her hands, but she was going to be okay. The house burned down to the foundation that night. Total loss. But Margaret held her dog and watched her granddaughter being loaded into the ambulance, and the look on her face, relief and gratitude and grief all mixed together. That's something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. We did the cleanup, rolled up the hoses, went through the motions of post-incident procedure. Captain Morrison put his hand on my shoulder at one point, didn't say anything, just squeezed once and nodded. That was enough. Jake and I sat in the engine on the way back to the station, not talking, just watching the dark streets slip past. The adrenaline was fading now, leaving behind that particular exhaustion that comes after a call like this. Not physical tiredness, though that's there too, but an emotional weight, a heaviness in your chest that takes time to process. "That dog knew," Jake said finally. "I don't care what anyone says, that dog knew exactly what he was doing." I nodded, because he was right. That dog knew. The thing about animals is that we assume we understand them, but we don't. Not really. We project our own thoughts and emotions onto them. We make them simple in our minds because it's easier to think of them as driven purely by instinct and need. But anyone who's lived with animals, anyone who's really paid attention, knows there's something else there, some kind of intelligence or awareness or connection that we can't quite name. That dog could have run. When I opened the bedroom door, he could have bolted for safety, saved himself. He was scared enough, certainly. But instead, he stayed with that little girl. And when help arrived, he made sure we knew where she was. How did he know we were there to help? How did he understand that we needed to know about the closet? How did he overcome his own terror to communicate something so specific, so purposeful? I've thought about this a lot in the years since that night. I've turned it over in my mind, looked at it from different angles, tried to understand what I witnessed. And I've come to believe that what we call intelligence or consciousness or awareness, whatever it is that makes us human, that gives us the ability to choose and think and care, exists in forms and degrees we barely recognize. That dog made a choice. In the middle of absolute chaos and terror, when every survival instinct must have been screaming at him to save himself, he chose to stay with a vulnerable member of his pack. And then he chose to trust us, to trust that the strangers in masks and heavy gear were there to help, not harm. That's not instinct, that's something else. Something harder to name, but impossible to dismiss. 3 days later, I went to visit Margaret in the temporary housing the Red Cross had set up for her. Emma was back with her parents by then, recovering well, already telling everyone about the adventures she'd had hiding in Grandma's closet. Margaret was living in a small apartment until the insurance came through, starting the long process of rebuilding, but she had her dog, and that seemed to be enough. The dog, his name was Sam, I learned, recognized me immediately, came right over, tail wagging. That simple joy that dogs have when they see someone they know. I knelt down and scratched behind his ears, and he leaned into my hand with a contentment that seemed to say that the night of the fire was already far behind him, just another experience in a life full of experiences. "I can't thank you enough," Margaret said, and her voice was thick with emotion. "Both of them. You saved both of them." "But that's not quite true. I saved Sam, yes, but Sam saved Emma. I was just the tool he used to do it." Margaret made us tea and we sat in her small temporary living room and talked about the fire, about Emma, about the long road ahead. She told me stories about Sam, how she'd found him at the shelter 6 years ago, how he'd been returned twice by other families who said he was too anxious, too high-strung, how she'd taken him home anyway, worked with him, given him the time and patience he needed to learn to trust. "He's always been protective of Emma," she said. "From the first time they met, he just took to her, followed her everywhere, slept by her door when she stayed over, like he'd appointed himself her guardian. The apartment was small and temporary and filled with donated furniture and clothes, but it was warm and safe, and Sam was curled up at Margaret's feet. And somewhere across town, Emma was probably playing with her toys and dreaming about Grandma's house before it burned. "What will you do?" I asked. "About the house?" Margaret looked out the window at the gray February day. "Rebuild," she said simply. "What else can you do? You rebuild, you start over, you carry forward what matters." I left a while later, drove back to the station, went through the familiar routines of checking gear and writing reports and drinking too much coffee. But something had shifted in me, some subtle recalibration of how I understood my work, my purpose, the shape of courage and choice. We tell ourselves stories about heroes, about brave firefighters running into burning buildings, about dramatic rescues and last-second saves. And those stories are true as far as they go. But they're also incomplete, because the real heroes sometimes are the ones who make quiet choices in moments of terror, who stay when they could run, who trust when they have every reason to fear, who somehow find the wisdom to know what matters most and the courage to act on it. Sam was a hero that night, not because he did something dramatic or flashy, but because he chose love over fear. He chose responsibility over survival. He chose to trust that help was possible even when the world was burning around him. And in doing so, he saved a life. Maybe more than one, because that little girl has a whole future ahead of her now, full of moments and experiences and relationships that would have been erased if not for a dog who refused to leave her behind. The months passed, spring came, and with it the slow work of rebuilding. I'd check in with Margaret occasionally, see how things were progressing. The foundation was poured, the framing went up, the roof went on. By summer, there was a house again on Willow Street, different from the one that had burned but recognizable. A phoenix rising from ash and insurance money and human stubbornness. Emma came to visit often during the construction. I'd see her sometimes when I drove past, running around the yard with Sam while Margaret talked to contractors and made decisions about paint colors and cabinet hardware. The child had no lasting trauma from the fire, that resilience that children have, that ability to experience something terrible and then move forward without carrying the full weight of it. But I wonder if she'll remember when she's older. I wonder if there will come a time when she understands what happened that night, what choice her grandmother's dog made, how close the margin was between tragedy and survival. We had a small ceremony at the station a few months after the fire. Nothing official, nothing formal, just a gathering where Captain Morrison presented Sam with an honorary fire department badge and made some remarks about courage coming in all forms. Sam sat patiently through the whole thing, tolerating the attention with the slightly bemused dignity that dogs have when humans are making a fuss over them. Emma was there too, and she gave a short speech that her mother had clearly helped her write, but that she delivered with the complete sincerity that only small children can manage. She talked about how Sam was her best friend, how he always protected her, how she was going to be a firefighter when she grew up just like the men and women who saved her and Sam. And then she wrapped her arms around Sam's neck and buried her face in his fur. And the dog just stood there calmly, accepting this display of affection the way he'd accepted everything else, with patience and grace and an almost embarrassing nobility. That's the image I carry with me from that day. A little girl hugging her dog, both of them alive because of choices made in extremity, because of love that persisted even in the midst of chaos and terror. Years have passed since that February night. I'm closer to retirement now than I am to the beginning of my career. I've responded to hundreds more fires, saved more lives, lost a few despite our best efforts. The work continues, the calls keep coming, the wheel keeps turning. But I think about Sam more than I probably should. I think about that moment when he pawed at the closet door, when he looked back at me with such clear purpose. I think about the choice he made to stay with Emma when he could have saved himself. I think about what it means that a dog could demonstrate that kind of moral clarity when the world was literally burning. We like to think of ourselves as special, we humans with our big brains and our technology and our complex societies. We like to imagine that consciousness and choice and moral reasoning are uniquely ours, that the boundary between us and the rest of the animal world is clear and absolute. But I've seen too much to believe that anymore. I've seen too much intelligence in the eyes of animals, too much purposeful action, too much evidence of inner lives that are rich and complex and far beyond what we give them credit for. Sam didn't save Emma because he was trained to. He didn't do it because of some simple instinct. He did it because he loved her, because he'd appointed himself her protector, because when the moment came, he was able to put her needs above his own fear. That's not just instinct, that's virtue, that's character. That's a kind of heroism that has nothing to do with species and everything to do with the choices we make when everything is on the line. The new house on Willow Street has been finished for years now. Margaret lives there with Sam, and Emma visits on weekends and holidays. And life continues in the way that life does, full of small moments and ordinary days and the quiet accumulation of shared experience that we call family. Sam is older now. His muzzle is gray, his steps a little slower, he sleeps more than he used to, dreams of whatever it is that dogs dream about. But when Emma comes to visit, he still follows her from room to room, still positions himself between her and the door, still takes his self-appointed role as guardian seriously. I drove past the house a few weeks ago, saw them all in the front yard, Margaret working in her garden, Emma pushing Sam in a wagon because his hips don't work as well as they used to, the dog sitting patiently and letting the child do this ridiculous thing because it makes her happy. And I felt something in my chest, some complicated mixture of emotions that I don't have proper words for. Pride, maybe, at being part of the story. Humility, certainly, at being shown what courage really looks like. Gratitude for the reminder that heroism isn't always loud or dramatic or obviously human. Sometimes it's just a dog who refuses to leave a child behind. Sometimes it's just love that proves stronger than fear. Sometimes it's just the quiet choice to trust that help is coming, even when the world is burning. There's a photo on the wall at the station now, Emma and Sam and the crew from that night, all of us standing in front of Engine 7 on the day we gave Sam his honorary badge. I pass it every shift, and every shift I pause for just a moment. Remember that February night. Remember the heat and the smoke, and the moment when I opened that closet door. The work of a firefighter is about saving lives. That's what we sign up for, that's what we train for. That's the simple, noble purpose that gets us out of bed when the tones drop at 3 in the morning. But sometimes, not often, but sometimes, the work is about being saved. About having your eyes open to something you didn't understand before. About learning from the most unexpected teachers. Sam taught me something that night. He taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the choice to act despite fear. He taught me that intelligence and consciousness and moral awareness exist in forms we barely recognize. He taught me that love can create heroism in the most unlikely vessels. And he taught me that sometimes, when you think you're doing the rescuing, you're the one being rescued. The calls keep coming, the fires keep burning, the work continues. But I carry that lesson with me now, into every situation, every emergency, every moment when split-second choices might mean the difference between tragedy and survival. I carry the memory of a dog who saw what needed to be done and did it. And I carry the understanding that heroism is everywhere, if we're wise enough to recognize it, if we're humble enough to learn from it, if we're open enough to let it change us. It's February again as I write this. Another cold night at the station, another cup of coffee, another wait for the tones that might drop at any moment. The wheel keeps turning. The work continues. Life moves forward in its messy, complicated, beautiful way. But I think about Sam, and I think about Emma, and I think about the choices we make when the world is burning. And I think that maybe, just maybe, we're all capable of that same kind of heroism if we can find the courage to see it, to choose it, to be it when the moment comes. The smoke moves across the frozen ground, the cold air settles in, and somewhere out there, a dog sleeps beside a child's bed, standing guard through the night, faithful to a promise only he understands. That's the story. That's what happened. That's what I carry with me into the dark. A dog who knew what mattered, and a child who lives because he did.